of the AutoCAD tutorial series. This lesson will cover many of the commands which we have not covered so far that are on the Modify toolbar. So I'll be going through many of these commands in this lesson. Not all of them, but a good number of those. To start, first you want to open up the Lesson 05 DWG file or AutoCAD file from the shared drive under the video tutorials folder. So you can open that up where you found the last one for the last lesson, and your screen should look something like this after you've opened it up. Again, I've turned the nav cube off and set the units to architectural units. The first thing I'd like to go over is how to use one of the settings on the bottom here called ortho. Ortho is short for orthogonal. Simply all that does is if you're drawing something like lines, if you have the ortho turned off, okay, it allows you to draw a line at any angle you want to. However, if you turn the ortho on, it restricts your lines to increments of 90 degrees, so pretty much up or down, left and right. So again, ortho means orthogonal, and orthogonal refers to 90 degrees. So if you want to only have parallel or vertical, horizontal or vertical lines, you could turn the ortho command on or off. So we'll be using that as we go through this tutorial. Right now I have it turned off. The first command I want to cover is the offset command. Offset is used for either offsetting polygons or lines so that they are parallel or concentric to each other, depending on if you're doing a polygon or a circle. So to use the offset command, it's the fourth button down on the Modify toolbar. We can access it by clicking on the offset command, or we can also type it into the command prompt at the bottom. Then the first thing it asks you for is specify an offset distance. So in this case here, I'd like to offset this box in 1 inch. So in my offset distance, I'm going to type in 1, hit enter. Then it says select the objects to offset. So just like the directions say in the command prompt, I want to select this box. Then it says pick a point on the inside or outside to offset it. If I want to offset it in, I simply click inwards. If I want to offset it in again, I can select the object and go in again. If I want to offset it outwards, I can click my original one and click outwards, and you can keep going as many times as you want to. Again, for the circle, say I wanted to offset it in 2 inches this time, I can enter. If I hit enter now, it'll activate the last command that I used, which in this case was offset. However, I'm just going to click on the toolbar again to access the offset. Now it says specify my distance. I want to make sure I change it to 2. Whatever value you use last will be saved in there. Hit the enter command, then select the object, and then select the distance. I want to make some concentric circles. But now notice that my circle is not being created as I try and create this smaller one on the inside. And if you notice down on the toolbar in the command prompt, it says cannot offset that object. That's because if I try and offset this into 2 inches smaller, the radius will be so small it'll just end up being a dot, so it doesn't work. But I can go the opposite way and make essentially a bullseye target all the way out. So that's how you can use the offset command for polygons and circles. Lines works the same way. This is very useful when you start drawing your floor plans. If I use the offset command to offset my lines, say I had the start of a floor plan drawn here and I want to make a corner here. Well, as you know from the classroom floor plan, walls have a thickness. Typically in a house, the walls are 4 inches thick. For the purposes of this tutorial, I'm just going to use 2. It says left at 2. I'm going to hit enter. Select the object, in this case the line, and I want to go inwards. And this line here, I maybe want to go outwards. So now I have two sets of parallel lines here. Now what I need to do is I need to fill in this corner to give it basically to complete the corner here. So there's a couple different ways I can do that. One nifty command that you can use is a command called fillet. It's the third one up here from the bottom. If I select the fillet command, okay, it says now down here to specify either the first object or a radius, and a couple other commands here. So what I'm going to do is hit the down button on my keyboard till I get to radius. Select that. The radius is set to 0 by default, so I want to leave it at that. Hit the enter command. Now click one of the lines and then click the other line, and notice it extended those lines and filled in the corner with a radius of 0. I can do this. I can repeat it again by hitting Enter, which activates the last command, which was fillet. Click the first line, and then click the second line, and now it fills in that corner. Now I have a sharp 90-degree corner here, which is typically what you would have when two walls meet. You can also use this fillet command if you want to put a curve on an edge. So say I wanted to put a curve on this corner with a radius of, say, 3 inches. Again, I can activate the fillet command, hit the down button on the keyboard till I get to radius. Now I want to set my radius to, say, 2 inches. Hit Enter. And now I select the lines in the same fashion that I did before. And now notice it put a 2-inch radius fillet on that corner. I can repeat the same thing and put a rounded edge on its outside corner, and that's worked the same way. So if you want a sharp corner that has no curve to it, always use a radius of 0. And if you want anything other than 0, you can change the radius to whatever is necessary. I can also offset this curve in, which is kind of convenient, or outwards. If I wanted another parallel line here, another 2 inches out, I can use the offset command again, which is already set to 2 inches. So like this, work my way out, and I can offset the lines and get 3 parallel sets of lines there. So that covers the offset command. The next command I'd like to show you how to use is the mirror command. Mirror command essentially creates a mirror image of an object. This is extremely useful if you have, say, a door symbol that you want it to flip over a given axis. If rotating it didn't work, say you want it to flip it one way. What I'm going to do for the purposes of this exercise is I'm going to mirror this set of objects about this line here. So if I select the mirror command, which is the third one down on the Modify toolbar, okay, first thing it says to do is select the objects. So in this case, I want to mirror all these. So I'm drawing a green rectangle to highlight them all. So now it says 8 objects found. Hit the Enter key, and now you need 2 points to specify a mirror line. So if you look here next to the cursor, it says specify a first point. So I'm going to click on this point, and then I'm going to specify this as my second point. And then it asks you if you want to do you want to erase the source objects. If you leave it for N for no, it's going to leave the original. If you hit Y for yes, it's going to delete them. So in this case, I want to leave the original, so I hit yes, or I'm sorry, hit no, and then it leaves the original, and I have a duplicate copy mirrored about this line here. So again, that's a useful command. Say you had a set of doors and you wanted to mirror them to make a set of double doors, you can mirror them about a line and make the same image, but as a mirror copy. So that's a pretty useful command. Now another one that's pretty useful is the stretch command. Stretch allows you to stretch an object, typically a rectangle or square, out to a given length and still keep one of the dimensions the same. So in this case here, say I wanted to stretch the length of this rectangle a couple inches this way, but I didn't want to make it any taller. So in that case, if I select the stretch command and I highlight the parts that I want to stretch. So in this case, I only want to stretch this part. So notice I'm only highlighting these 3 lines here. Now I've selected the object. Now you have to right click to activate the next part of the command. It says specify a base point. So in this case, I want to drag from here. So I'm going to click this and then drag in the direction I want to go. So I want to offset it out this way. Say I wanted to offset it 8 inches. I drag it in that direction, hit 8, and now it's stretched that rectangle only 8 inches out to the right. I can repeat the same process over with the other ones if I wanted to stretch them 8 inches as well. So again, the stretch, select the parts that you want to stretch. I can stretch them all if I want to. Right click, click on a point to drag from, and now notice they're all going this way. I can turn my ortho command on so that they only stretch horizontally if I like. And now say I want to double that, I want to go 16. Now I stretched them out 16 inches. So that's the stretch command is useful for modifying objects in one dimension. If you want to modify things in 2 dimensions and you want to maintain the proportional size, you would use the scale command. So So say I wanted to scale this rectangle up to twice the size, but I want to scale the height by 2 and the width by 2. So in that case, I would use the scale command, select the scale command, to select objects. So this is the object I want to scale. Hit enter. Just pick a base point. So a base point in this case is the point that's not going to move. So if I wanted to scale it from, say, this corner, click on that corner, then I can drag it out and either click to arbitrarily scale it, or if I want to make it, say, double the size, I type in 2 as my scale factor, hit enter, and notice the size increased length and width by a factor of 2. If I wanted to set it back to the original size, I can undo it, or click on the scale command again, reselect the object, hit enter, pick the same base point this time, and now if I want to make it half that size, I can go 0.5, which would make it back to its original size where I started from. So if you want to scale it, make it smaller, you use a decimal or fraction less than 1. If you want to go larger than its original size, you can use a factor like 1.5, 2, 3, up to as big as you want. You'll also find this convenient if you say you by mistake you drew a line in inches, or you drew this rectangle, say, as 4 inches by 2 inches, but in reality you wanted it to be 4 feet by 2 feet. So in that case, you can simply use a scale factor of 12 to convert from inches to feet, or 1/12 to go from feet to inches, or vice versa. So you'll find that pretty convenient for modifying the size of objects and keeping them proportional to one another, essentially without distorting it. Another command on the Modify toolbar is the explode command. The explode command sounds a little funny, but what it's really used for is separating a linked object. So if you notice, I hover over this rectangle and it's all one object. If I wanted to break this rectangle up from one polygon to 4 separate lines, I can select the explode command like I've already done, click on the object that I want to explode, now hit enter. Now it allows me to select each of these lines as one unit at a time. To say I wanted to just delete the top line, I can now click on the top line and I can delete that, and now I have a rectangle with an open top. So again, to explode something, simply click on the explode command. If you want to select more than one object, you can highlight multiple objects. So in this case, I wanted to select all these rectangles, hit enter. Now they're all separate lines that I can move, modify, rotate, and do as I please with them. If you want to put objects that you exploded back together, you can use the region command. So say I wanted to region just the center rectangle here. What I can do is I could click on the region command, and it says select the objects that I want to region. So in this case, I want to region these 4 lines. Hit enter. Now it puts those back together to one unit. So that's the explode and region command. Region puts things back together, which is on the draw toolbar on the bottom left here. The explode takes things apart, which is on the bottom right here of the modify toolbar. One last command is the trim command. Say you had 2 lines overlapping like so, and you wanted this line here to be trimmed so it stopped at this point here. There's a couple different ways you can do that. You can manually select the line and move the endpoint over by clicking on it and dragging it over to the point you want to make, to where you want it to stop. However, that's a little cumbersome. So can you get a little cumbersome? So if I wanted, another way of doing that is by using the trim command. If I select trim, highlight everything that you want to trim, so just draw a big rectangle over everything, hit the enter command, then it says specify part you want to trim. In this case, I want to trim this corner here, so I select that line. Now say I want a sharp corner, I can trim this line as well to give myself a nice sharp corner. You'll use this a lot for making floor plans as well. Also, what's convenient about the trim command is if I have multiple lines, I'm just going to draw a bunch of random lines here. overlapping this line, and I wanted to trim all these back so they're all stop at this line here, I can use the trim command again by clicking on it, highlight all the objects that I want. Again, I'm dragging right to left so everything's selected that the box touches. Right click or hit enter. Now I want to trim all of these. So I could click on them one at a time to trim them one at a time, or I can select them all again like this, and that trimmed all the lines off with that, even with that line. So that's a way of trimming multiple things at once by using the select command that we covered earlier. So in this tutorial we've covered a number of commands. We've covered the ortho button down here, which restricts your motion for drawing lines and shapes, either horizontal or vertical. We talked about the offset command, which can be used for offsetting circles, polygons, or lines. We talked about the fillet command, which can be used for making 90-degree corners or corners with a radius if you specify the radius. We talked about the scale and stretch commands. Scale again stretches things proportionally in both directions. Stretch only stretches in a one dimension that you specify. We talked about using the explode and region commands. Explode breaks up an object into its individual elements, and region puts them back together. So here's an example of a regioned object, and this one's exploded because it's 4 separate lines. And lastly, we talked about the trim command, which I just demonstrated with trimming the different lines. At this point in time, what I'd like you to do is open up this file, or you can simply create another file, it doesn't really matter, and experiment with using these different commands that we just talked about. At this point in time, you should be familiar with just about all the commands on the Modify toolbar, and those are the most common commands that you'll be using to create floor plans and other objects within your floor plans. Thanks for watching.